Great. So hello and welcome again on behalf of the Sabin Vaccine Institute, the Bay Area Global Health Alliance, and the Alliance for Advancing Health Online to our Insights Dialogue launch event. Before we launch into the presentations, I just want to remind folks that we are using a webinar format today. So we do ask that if you have any questions, to please submit them through the Q&A located at the bottom of your screen. You can also respond to questions and engage through the chat at the bottom of your screen as well. Just be sure to select all panelists and attendees. And then time permitting, if we are able to have a live Q&A, you can also use the raise hand feature during the discussion if you want to speak. So with that, we ask you to test the chat now. Please share your name and where you're joining us from. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Jen Seiler. Over to you, Jen.
Great. Thanks, Liz. It is wonderful to welcome you all today to the official launch of InsightsDialogue.org, which is an initiative of the Alliance for the Advancement of Health Online, or AAHO. My name is Jen Seiler, as Liz just said, and I'm the Vice President of Global Community Engagement at the Sabin Vaccine Institute. So Sabin and our Boost community, alongside the Bay Area Global Health Alliance and a Shot in the Arm podcast, are thrilled to be part of the Alliance for the Advancement of Health Online, again, AAHO, whose mission is to bring actors from the technology, health, global development, and academic sectors to advance understanding of how social media and online engagement can best be utilized to better understand and increase health and resiliency of communities around the world. AAHO's two initial focus areas to address vaccine acceptance and equity are, first, to advance the research on how best to use social media and digital platforms to address vaccine hesitancy, and second, to accelerate research insights through targeted investments in researchers around the world. And to the second point, recently, the Vaccine Confidence Fund, also an initiative of AAHO, has selected 33 organizations around the world to receive grants focused on accelerating those research insights in vaccine acceptance and demand. Next slide, please. InsightsDialogue.org, just launched today, please check it out, is a new platform designed to share the research insights, evidence, and how-tos to vaccine program implementers, public health communicators, behavior change scientists, and other stakeholders. Specifically, we will highlight here, next slide, resources, events, and then also our podcasts. Next slide, please. Dig into each of these resources. So we have begun to curate research insights with over 40 cases, articles, and tools featured on our resources page, which is easily sortable by region, type, sort of theme, topic, audience, and platform. And we will continue to regularly update the resources available. We are particularly excited for what I mentioned earlier, the 33 organizations chosen by the Vaccine Confidence Fund, who will begin their work soon. We'll hopefully begin to be sharing out insights from their work early next year. Next slide, please. We also will feature, of course, events. This is the first in our series, bringing to life many of the case studies, tools, and learnings featured on our resources page and throughout the site, by bringing the individuals who drove the programs highlighted in the research into conversation with you all. We will host these events at regular intervals, and we'll bring out the most relevant themes that are arising with the ongoing research that's happening. For example, two of the biggest themes that we have started to see coming up just from our initial kind of deep curation for this site are the value and effectiveness of emotional appeals and social media listening to inform immunization programming. So two very likely topics for our next events coming up in the coming months. And then last slide, or next slide, not last slide. Lastly, we're excited to partner with a Shot in the Arm podcast, who is hosting the Vax Up podcast series, which is exploring the power of social media to strengthen vaccine confidence and shape health behaviors. So these two, we've already had two episodes, which you can find on the site, and a third one is soon to be released later this month. And so with that, next slide. Just want to thank you guys all for being here. We're really excited for the launch today and for the conversation today and for many to come in the next months ahead. And so without further ado, I'm excited to hand things over to our esteemed panel hosted by Nok Nadlagu, who is our very close partner at Adaptive Change Advisors and the regional director in South Africa for ACA. So Nok, over to you.
Thank you, Jen. Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. You can hear me, great. Thank you, Jen. My name is Untitled, as Jen has already said. I'm in Kampala at the moment, so good evening to those in East Africa. I see a lot of Bush community members. A special welcome to you, and thank you for the work that you do. And everyone else, thank you for joining us this morning. I know for others on the West Coast in America. Particularly excited about this conversation with Sarah, Nelson, and Amanda, who've done amazing work in this space, and we look forward to the lessons that they're going to share. So what we'll do is start with some brief introductions from our panelists, and then move into presentations. That they'll give some brief presentations on the work that they're doing. But before that, let me allow our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Sarah, Nelson, and then Amanda. Sarah, for people that don't know who you are, please say a bit about yourself and your work.
Thanks, Nok. I'm Sarah Francis. I'm with Upswell. And the Upswell is an organization that supports organizations like UNICEF, the WHO, and Girl Effect in reaching their goals using social. So we really help them bring the power of their communications to the social community. I'll pass it over to Nelson.
Everyone, so Nelson Leone, I am a CSO of Decode. Decode is a data intelligence tech company, and I am a former UNICEF manager. I am the guy who led the Zika outbreak response in Brazil 5 years ago. And during 6 years, I was working in UNICEF in digital response and digital strategy and digital engagement. And I'm here in order to support and give some, or share some experience from my work in Zika. Nice to meet you guys. Over to Amanda.
Hello, everyone. Nice to see you all. My name is Amanda. I'm Communications Officer in UNICEF Indonesia. So I'm part of the Communication Division in UNICEF Indonesia. On a daily basis, I'm in charge of managing UNICEF Indonesia's digital assets, and that includes website and all our social media channels. And in a campaign that we'll present later, along with fellow colleagues from Communications Division and also from Health, and with our government counterparts in MOH, I work with the team to develop content and also managing the campaign. Thank you, over.
Thank you, Amanda. We'll start with the presentations, and I want to start with Sarah and Amanda, who will give us a brief outline of the work that they've done and some of the lessons and insights coming out of that work. So over to you, ladies.
Thanks, Nok. So I'm going to set the stage for the campaign that is still ongoing, actually, in Indonesia around routine immunizations during the pandemic. And then I'm going to pass it over to Amanda because she really led the campaign and really continued to build the community. Next slide, please. So this campaign was started way back in 2020, which seems like a decade ago. And the goal of this campaign was to increase the motivation of parents to continue to use routine immunization services for their children during the pandemic. And one of the theories of change, one of the things that we were exploring when we when UNICEF Indonesia decided to launch this campaign is whether or not it would be possible to use social to actually motivate the parents. So we did a test run in 3 provinces, and the campaign in this test run was measured by what's called a Facebook brand lift study. A brand lift study is a tool that was originally designed for brands. It's everyone in public health knows the model fairly well, right? It's a test and a treatment and a control measurement. So you have your treatment group and your control group. Your treatment group sees your content or your creative that you put on social. Your control group does not. And then questions are served in the Facebook or Instagram news feed. So the questions can be, for in this case, we were lucky enough to be able to design our own questions. So we asked questions about knowledge and attitudes and practice and behavior to see if there was an impact of the amazing creative that Amanda developed. Next slide, please. This is what our first test campaign looked like. This is a timeline. And you can see that it's really short timeline. One of the best things about working with social media is you can test and learn very rapidly. So we worked on planning and all of the research around the campaign. Amanda then designed the content. We came up with the brand lift questions, launched the campaign, and just a few short weeks later, we were able to see our results. Next slide, please. And the key findings were fantastic. One of the first things we realized, so the provinces that we tested in were the 3 provinces where routine immunization has the lowest rates in Indonesia, and they tend to be more rural provinces. What was really exciting is that we reached almost 50% of the adult population in those provinces, 70% of the Facebook users, with a small budget. We saw a change in knowledge and attitudes and around routine immunization, depending on the age and gender group, between a 5 and 10 point increase, which was so exciting. And we learned a lot of things that we wanted to continue exploring. In fact, we learned that there was, maybe we didn't see as much of a lift between men and women looking at our content. So we decided, for our next iteration of this campaign, we're really going to focus on content that can also speak to fathers. And we saw something really interesting because Amanda and her team divided the content into 2 buckets. So they had the buckets of these big, beautiful images of moms and babies, like you see here, and some images that were more, they were drawn, so they were illustrated images. They linked to listicles or articles, or they were infographics. And we noticed that there was a really difference in behavior between how the community interacted with the emotional posts, these big photographs, and the illustrative posts, which made us want to be able to explore in future campaigns to learn, what type of post moves what type of behavior. Next slide, please. And here you can see the results. These are the questions over on the left. So we asked, if they recalled seeing an ad from UNICEF. We asked, how likely are you to take your child to the next routine immunization? How likely are you to recommend vaccination to other friends and families? How important is it to continue? And a question around safety in the pandemic. And you can see, depending on the age and gender, there was some big lifts, right? Really, the sweet spot for us, what we were most excited about, is you can see that the age blocks where people are most likely to be parents, we were moving a lot. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand it over to Amanda so she can talk about the creative and the community.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So everyone, next I'm going to be speaking about our creative production and also our campaign implementation. So in terms of creative, we divided our creative approach into 2 categories. The first is emotional approach, and the second one is educational approach. So the main distinction between the 2 categories is actually the visual. As you can see with the emotional content, we took our photographs assets, they mostly featuring children and also family. Then we added some motivational quotes in the visual. Could also be in form of testimonials from parents, like about why they took their child to get immunized and why the children want to get immunized, what are their hopes and wishes, something that we hope can really provoke emotional response from parents and also caregivers. Meanwhile, for educational content, it means that we were using illustration and graphics, and we emphasize more on like data, facts, and statistics. And as you can see in the screen here, here are some samples of our creatives. Like this is the screenshot of content with photos are the one that we called as emotional, while the other ones with the blue graphic there are what we refer to as educational. And in terms of result, we actually received varied results, but generally the emotional content were the ones that received high engagement along with positive sentiment. Next slide, please.
And Amanda, how many pieces of creative did you develop?
I think it's around 30 creatives from 45 days. So it's quite a lot. Thank you, Sarah. So next, so we run this campaign for approximately 45 days. And during that time, we managed to gain more than 6 million post engagement, which means that users are engaging with our post. They give reactions to our post, whether they liked it or like they give any emojis in our post, sharing our post, and also commenting on our post. And one of our objectives from this campaign is that we'd like to encourage users to share our content within their circles, because sometimes when a user sees a post being shared by their friends or by their relatives, they tend to have this higher acceptance to the message because it feels like someone they know really endorse this message. So that's why we would like to encourage sharing as well. And other than sharing, we thought that comments are also one of the most important metrics, because social media enables brands and organizations to have this two-way of communication with their audience. So monitoring the comment section is very crucial in our campaign, which brings us to the next section, which is about community management. Yeah. So other than publishing content, it's also important for us to pay attention to the comment section and to listen to what your audience has to say, whether they agree or disagree with the message that we are publishing, what's their arguments, what's their questions that they frequently ask, how do they respond to each other in the comment section. These are all, we thought it's very valuable. And this is why we also have community management as part of our campaign. What we did for our campaign is that we assign a member of our team to monitor the comment section in daily basis and to give responses to questions as needed. Then we would also mark comment, sentiment that we received as positive and also as negative. So at the end of the campaign, we could really compare the percentage between positive and negative sentiments from the comments. And as you can see in the slide here, here we listed some most common questions and arguments from the audience. So in the future, if we'd like to work on another routine immunization campaign, we can craft our messaging based on these questions and arguments. Next slide, please. Yeah, so lastly, to give you an illustration of our overall campaign, here's our timeline from 2020 to 2021. So in total, we divided our work into 3 phases. The first one being the 3 provinces campaign in November 2020, followed by national sample in May 2021, and finally the national rollout in October 2021. So one of the most unique things about running digital campaign is that it's like a continuous testing and implementation, as Sarah mentioned before as well. So like from the first phase of campaign, we had our key learnings, what's working and what's not working. So during phase 2, we try to implement what's working in phase 1 and what new things that we'd like to test during this phase. And it keeps going like that until we find the right formula. So even so, like every once in a while, we need to review our performance. So at the end, other than testing and implementation, evaluation is also crucial. So I think that brings us to our last slide. Yeah, thank you. Over to Nelson.
Everyone, thank you, Amanda. Congrats.
Sorry, Nelson, before you go for it there, I know there are people who have questions. I have a lot too. Please just drop them in the Q&A session. We'll get to them by the end of the conversation. And I see you people like Adunola, Navid, Emmanuel, Musa, Martha, Areda. I see you. Please ask questions, and we'll get to them towards the end. Nelson, go ahead.
Okay, so I will say, I'm talking about the Zika virus outbreak. So as you can see in the left side of the slide, we have Brazil, and this is the UNICEF presence in Brazil. And during the outbreak, we realized that the UNICEF presence versus the municipalities classified high risk at mosquito infection was the same. So next, move forward, please. One slide, just. Yeah, so you can see it's very similar. No, sorry. Yeah, thank you. And so the infection was there, the outbreak was there, and we didn't have information about Zika, but the mosquito already existed in Brazil. Next slide. So what were the challenges that we faced that time? So low-level risk perception among the rest of the population, because the Aedes aegypti, as I mentioned, was there, and we were facing dengue, we were facing yellow fever and chikungunya, and so other disease, they were there. And there were also a misunderstanding about the disease, because we listened that pregnant woman was affected and maybe can cause microcephaly in babies, but that time we didn't have the whole information, as very similar that we have been facing now, fake news, rumors, all those kind of things that we were receiving through the internet. Next slide. So what we want to know that time, so what were people talking about, and when it comes Zika, who is doing the talking, how can we engage them to protect themselves and combat the mosquito proliferation, and how can we use this information to inform our campaigns? But what was the problem? We didn't have information. So, and we didn't have time to think about. So what we did was start the campaign without any other information. And in order to try to understand, oh, the Ministry of Health, they are doing this kind of content, so let's try to replicate it. Next slide. And in Brazil, now we have 220 million, but that time 200 million people, and over 70% were connected. It means that people were like accessing all the information through social media. I am talking about 2016 here. Next slide. And we started to run with Facebook a digital monitoring. Why? Because we realized that our content were not engaging people through the social media, the content that we didn't have time to think about or develop a strategy, because we are like replicating content from other partners. So the digital monitoring the idea of that was to understand the public conversation about Zika. Okay, here you can see the volume of interaction on social media when we started. So Facebook helped us to extract information since the beginning of the year. So here you can see how big or how quick the message is spread all over the world. So we start in Brazil, and now you can see moving forward the volume of interaction that happened all over the world about Zika. So the outbreak happened and it started to spread as a pandemic all over the world, and we are very expert now. So it was my first pandemic that time. Next slide. So in total, we listened over 17 million interactions just on Facebook. And if we sum Twitter and other platforms, over 50 million interactions just about Zika. Next slide. And we realized that the Ministry of Health was leading the conversation, but again, they are replicating content based on the information that they had that time. So people were following, organizations were following all the content related to pregnant women and microcephaly, and just that part. Next slide. And what the digital listening gave us, brought us information. So who is talk about? So they were talk about mosquito, dengue, and chikungunya. So about vector control, how to protect yourself, doubts about Zika, symptoms, and myths and rumors. So all this information, the listening tool brought to us. Next slide. Gave us all the information also that 82% of the population that were interacting inside social media channels had between 18 to 44 years old. Next slide. And the most important part, gave the information that were not women that was leading the conversation, but instead of that, men. And literally every single organization in the world, they were talking, just focused their content through women because they were affected. But we forgot that probably they are married, they have friends, they have relatives, they have sisters, and they were think about that part. So realize that nobody were talking to men, and they were leading the engagement process inside social media. They were leading the interaction. They are looking for receiving content. Next slide. And everything was happening, even that time, on mobile. So 84% of the people were interacting inside mobile phones. And we were not framing or creating content based on just mobile, just for desktop, like big screens, like with a lot of information inside the content. And we didn't realize that time. So these insights gave us a different point of view. Next slide. So this was our first content, or like very similar content that we had before the insights, and we got like invest in media, 58,000 reached people. So just that part. And when we realized that men were like looking for content that we should impact them, we should create emotional content that link the men with women, because some men also in Brazil, they were abandoned their families because they don't want to having a baby with microcephaly. So we decided to create a very powerful content. Next slide. That bring the attention of men and their families. And we created this content. So public outreach, once we had the insights, so the right message for men to the right audience at the right time. And this is the biggest content that we had about interactions and insights in Brazil until that time. So over 3.4 million people were reached with just this content, and it was an organic content without any cash. So we realized that we were doing the right information now, and based on that, we revamped the whole strategy and developed a new strategy based on emotional content and informational content. But instead of doing and replicating that every single organization were doing that time, we were focused on them. Next slide. And we got it. So about raise awareness regarding UNICEF, we spiked the arrow in 7%, and we convince people based on focus group research and also public research in order to take action against the mosquito in 3%. Next slide. And this is the last one. So what we realize and lessons learned about the Zika case, the importance of digital listening and formative research, partnership with tech companies, because without Facebook, without the Upswell and Action Sprout that time that gave us the opportunity to listen to inside Facebook, we couldn't have these insights and have this information. And we should also having a different intersection work with different areas inside your organization, not only digital, but the same kind of message should be done not only by digital, but also by offline and other areas inside your organization. That's it. Sorry for interruption.
Thank you, Nelson. And you know, just before we get into the panel discussion, which we'll have now, I just wanted to point the audience to the fact that both these case studies that our panelists have presented are available on insightsdialogue.org. That's insightdialogue.org. And we'll leave a bit of time towards the end of this session for Q&A. But if we don't get to your questions, Amanda, Nelson, and Sarah have graciously agreed to answer all your questions. So we'll put them on the platform as well. So without further ado, something that both Nelson and Sarah said reminded me of something attributed to Nelson Mandela, that if you speak to a person in English, you speak to their head, but if you speak to them in their native language, you speak to their heart. It talks to this dichotomy that you've outlined between emotional versus educational approaches. How does using social media allow you to connect with communities and drive change? How does language play a role there? I'll just open up that question to all of you. So whoever would like to go first, please go. How does social media allow you to connect with communities and drive change?
I'll jump in and then I'll pass it to Amanda and Nelson. I think one of my favorite thing about communicating on social media is that unlike, putting an ad on radio or in a newspaper, you enter into a conversation with people on social media. So the moment that you post something, the moment the community continues to have a dialogue about it. And as Amanda highlighted, the importance of shares. The community actually takes your content and makes it into their own voices, right? They alter it, they add their thoughts on top, and they share it with their friends and family. So you're designing content when you're thinking about, creating a campaign on social, you are creating content not just to speak to your audience, you're creating content that your audience can use to care for their family and to use in their own social media, because your audience really is your communications channel on social. Amanda, Nelson?
Yeah, Sarah, I think I just would like to echo what you have mentioned before. So one of the most fabulous thing about campaign in social media is the two-way communication, where we can receive feedback directly from our audience. So from each content that we publish there, every engagement is a valuable insight. Like from comments that we received, we can learn, is there any most common argument or questions from our audience that we need to address either in that specific campaign or in the future campaign. And or even from likes and share number, which topic is considered as most interesting or most engaging, or even more valuable to be shared. I think that's one of the greatest thing of having campaign in social media. Nelson, over to you if you have any additional inputs.
Yeah, you almost done, but just to complement one thing. So we cannot forget that this is a two-way communication, okay? So you should listen to them. So before even you create your content, imagine that what they want, listen to them, understand what they want, and then create your content. So you don't necessarily need to think about your just whole strategy from your side, but as a two-way conversation, you can build together. You can create content together. You can having their support to better achieve the community.
I think one of the most amazing things that Nelson and his team did was they really took off the professional hat, like the public service announcement, kind of in the United States, we have the wah, 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 the Peanuts parent voice. So, but then really, that picture of the father with the baby, that's just, it makes you stop for a second. It makes you stop scrolling so fast. It just grabs you right from your little mobile device. And I think that was so crucial to the impact of his campaign.
Yeah, I saw the picture that you're talking about, Sarah, in one of the reports that Nelson sent me. That's available also on insightsdialogue.org. And you know, I got an emotional response from looking at that picture. Nelson, can you tell our audience why you chose that picture? What from your listening and from this idea of putting the right message together for the right audience, what made you choose that particular image?
Okay, thank you for the question. So basically, because three things. First of all, realize from former researcher that men, they were abandoned their families because they don't want to having like a baby with microcephaly. So they are refusing this kind of challenge. So this was one topic that got our attention. And in the other side, there were a lot of other men that were like getting close to their family in order to give some support. So this is one part. The second one, realized from the insights that men, they were leading the conversation. They were leading the engagement inside the internet. And also they were sharing a lot of relevant content because they were afraid of their families. And the third one, realized that all the organization, they were sharing bold informations about the Zika, all metrics, all data about how many people were affected, how to protect, but nobody were talking about their heart, their emotional feelings. So with those three things, we realized that, okay, we need a bold picture that can transmit the information about we are facing a tremendous pandemic at that time, but we need to have hope. We should be close to our relatives. We should be close to our family, to our babies. And if you are a man, take close to your family, take care of your baby because you have the whole capacity. And what we did, so we started to understand where we can have this kind of story. And the fourth one that I forgot to mention, that the power of the storytelling. So instead of just share a content or a photo, if you share a photo with a story that is critical to engage the audience, because people will read the story, they will be like more engaged to share this kind of content. So we found this father that were like getting close. They instead of his woman cannot take care of the baby, so he took care of the baby. He was leading also the conversation in his community, and we shared this information, and was like chaotic. So we got like amazing results. A lot of people shared this, people talking about this, and this guy became a celebrity in his community as well. It was fantastic.
That's a wonderful outcome, Nelson. Thank you for that story. The power of storytelling, yeah?
Yeah, the last thing. So what we did 1 year later, so we create another content to keep continue the story. So we told to the audience, hey, you remind that guy, so and that child, so they are good now. So she is getting better, and we got another amazing results because of that, the power of storytelling.
Got you. And you know, communication strategy comes to mind, Nelson. And I want to pose this question to Sarah and Amanda. So how can you share some best practices for using some of this feedback that you got to shape campaigns? And Nelson, you can say a bit more about this. You mentioned rapid learnings from social media as well, from your Zika communication strategy. So some best practices that our audience can take away for using rapid feedback to shape campaigns. I'll start with you, Sarah.
So I think I'm going to use a story from what we learned in the Indonesia campaign. For our first iteration, we saw that, and remember that slide that had the breakdown of age and gender and their responses, you saw that men's responses and the lift we saw around with men, it was much lower than we had with women for the first campaign. And so quickly, Amanda and her team took that piece of information, and by the time our second campaign had started, they had designed content that they thought would really engage men directly. And I'm going to pass it to Amanda to talk about how she did that and what bits of information she pulled out to create that campaign.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. So I just would like to add from Sarah's point. So I think one important keyword from running social media campaign is measurable. I think compared with campaign on conventional media, where we could probably have more vague result, in social media, we can get more detailed data. For example, like how many people see our content, how many people engage with our content, how many people view our video, and for how long, and so on. So like even before the campaign ends, we can monitor the result ourselves, and not long after we publish the content. So with that amount of data, it will be easier for us to make an informed decision based on the quick evaluation that we do on regular basis, and then we can apply any adjustment as needed. So to add what Sarah shared before, so from the first phase of this campaign, we saw that there was a generally low lift among male audience. So in the national sample, we tried to create content specific for male audience. They were in form of articles, put in our UNICEF's website, and then we create content that directs our audience to that specific article, where the article talks about how fathers can have a role in their child immunization. So we were trying to encourage fathers and also like feel them to feel empowered that they can do something and that they can contribute to their child's health in the future. And before our full national rollout, we also evaluated results from our national sample to know like, which content worked for our national audience, so we can decide which content we need to include and also take out. I think that's things that I can add from Sarah. Thank you.
Okay, and regarding rapid learning during like a crisis or on social media channels, on social media strategy, so you need to pay attention that things can happen, changes can happen all the time. So in 1 hour, in 1 day, so we lived it literally in COVID. So we had one information, and like 2-3 days later, we we should change a little bit our information about that part. So your strategy is not static, is live in motion. So what you should do is keep understanding what is happening on your channels on social, listen to them. As I mentioned, it's a two-way conversation, so you should be open to receive and listen to what they are saying and understand what will work or not. You also should not do only one type of content. You should do A, B, C test in order to understand what kind of content we're engaging better, the kind of message change. One thing that I learned a lot with Sarah and Drew were say sometimes one word, one phrase, or one type of picture. If you change a little bit, you can change completely your engagement. So you should keep trying this all the time. And also, you should not abandon your old content. Sometimes you should remind that, okay, I did amazing content last time, so let's replicate it or let's reuse it. So social media strategy, digital strategies like a motion life. So you should keep doing and keep innovating, but not necessarily with new things based on what you have.
I just want to build on what Nelson just said, because it was so insightful. The idea that just keep testing. That's my, it's so important. I really think that there's no expert when it comes to social. That anyone that tells you they're a social or Facebook expert is, crazy. You shouldn't believe them, because you have to keep testing, right? You never know if, starting with a question or starting with a declarative statement or having a, an amazing story is going to win. I'm constantly shocked because for the US CDC, there used to be a joke that the image that I thought would win was always the image that was going to lose. So, the ability to test lots of images is so powerful.
And all of you have spoken a lot about digital, right? and I'm aware that some of the folks on this call work offline. Their efforts are offline, so to speak. So how can social media be used to inform drives offline? I'm going to ask Nelson to respond to that.
Great question. And we had the same kind of issue in Brazil. So I mentioned that 70% of the population, they were connected, but we had 30% that were not, and they were affected by Zika. So, but we realized that our message through social media were achieving some part of their families or the community. And what we did, so we run like focus group research in order to understand if the same kind of issues that we were facing, the same doubts or questions that they had were the same that we had on social media, and were very similar. So what we did was replicate our digital strategy, not only on digital, but the whole communication strategy. So we did like a cross channel, not only cross channel, but like we literally create a whole communication strategy based on the insights that we got, and deliver it through radio, to TV, to newspaper, to the community, to WhatsApp message, all those kind of things. So using the same kind of idea behind that. So achieve man, talk to man, and that our focus in that time. So the kind of picture that you should use. So you should use the power of digital also to feed your communication strategy.
Mm. And Sarah, when is using social media not the right approach?
Yeah, often social media isn't the right approach. So for these two examples, for both Brazil and Indonesia, there's a really high Facebook penetration. You can easily figure out, at least for Facebook, what the level of usage is in your country by going to insights. So that's facebook.com/insights, or if you just search on the Facebook website, you can find it, and you can see the daily or monthly active users in different parts of the world. And often, if the Facebook penetration isn't high in the community or country that you're working in, don't use it. It's not a silver bullet. But if it is, you can use it to inform all your other creative, right? Or all of your radio or TV, because you can rapidly test on social organically with no budget to see what works.
Okay, last question from me, and then I'll open the floor to the audience that has put in a few questions in the chat. So having said all this, where do immunization professionals start? I'm sure there are a few that want to use social media for their programs. So the question is, where do you start?
So
Amanda, you want to kick us off? Oh, sorry, Sarah.
I would recommend starting with your audience or your problem. So this is where I turn to experts like Amanda and Nelson, because they're the leaders in that. And then you design from there. Amanda, do you want to talk about audience research?
Yeah, so I think based on this campaign that we did, we try to use these tools, audience insight tools, where we can input the audience that we'd like to target at first, whether it's from a certain age range or certain location, and then we try to put it in these tools, and these tools will let you know how many audience are available in Facebook, how many people from that certain age groups and from that certain location use Facebook, what are their interests, what's their demographic status, and answer your question as well as from how do I start with this. I think as the first step, it's important to build your social media portfolio first. So meaning that you need to have your account, and then you need to publish content in your social media consistently. It doesn't have to be every day, but it's important to have regular schedule. Why? Because by publishing this content regularly, you start to get sense of which type of content works with your audience. How we come up initially with emotional versus educational approach in this campaign is also based on the insight that we have from our regular campaigns. So, and other than that, when you have broader range of people seeing your ad, when they're interested to know more about your organization, and then they visit your profile, and when they see you already have this various information, they'll see your page as trustful and like credible source, and they will likely to be interested to follow your account and to engage with your content. And with that growing number of audience and engagement, it could be your strong base when you run a campaign. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Nelson, there's a direct question for you. So I wanna take 2 or 3 questions from the audience. MJ, I believe you have some of those questions. Let's start with the question for Nelson around Zika, and pick out 2 more before we close. MJ?
Great. Nope. Did you want me to go ahead and ask the question for Nelson?
Please go ahead.
Great. So Nelson, for you, we have a question from Charlotte, who has asked, have the lessons learned from Zika campaign helped in the response to COVID-19 in Brazil, and most especially the COVID-19 vaccine introduction? How has this helped?
So I cannot talk through Brazil because I was there, but I was in UNICEF headquarters during the Zika, the COVID pandemic. And what I can say is, so the Insights for Impact case, the Zika case, helped us a lot to better enter during a pandemic response. So instead of just like starting to create content without any other information and think about that people need some kind of content, we started to our digital listening part, our partnership with Facebook and other platforms that could brought to us a lot of information, and based on that decide what we should do. So the lesson, the most important lesson learned from the Zika case were like 2 things. So first of all, keep listening. You should remind that even if you are like the authority of the content or the authority of the problem, you should listen to the audience. It's a 2-way conversation. The second one, remind that people, a lot of other organizations, they are doing the same. So try to understand what you should do different, what kind of audience you should focus on, what kind of content can aggregate value instead of all other organizations, or maybe create allies, and allies in 2 ways, organizations. And one thing that Amanda mentioned about like interact with your audience, remind that you have digital influencers, supporters that can give you the power to reach over even more people. So this is basically the lessons learned that we brought from Zika.
Okay, we'll take 1 more question, MJ, and then we'll come to a close just to respect everyone's time.
Absolutely. We did get 2 questions related to misinformation, and this question in particular is asking, I believe, for everyone on the panel, do the social media campaigns include moderation of comments to flag, address, or remove? I believe Amanda and Sarah talked a little bit about the importance of monitoring chat, but maybe each panelist could speak a little bit to kind of a strategy in combating misinformation with social media campaigns.
Very briefly, panelists.
So as I've mentioned before, one of the part in our campaign is community management. So what we did with comments that most likely are trolls or spams, Facebook has this feature where we can hide comments from users that could potentially snowballing, that could like spam and could encourage people to comment. And then once one user comment on a certain comment, it would the comment will then go up, so that when you click on the see more comments, it will seen at the top of the comments. So what we could suggest is that we better hide any spam or trolls in the comments. And I think other than that, Facebook also has this feature where we can limit people who can comment on our post. I think that could also be useful to fight this misinformation. And also don't forget to filter like any keywords that are not suitable for your audience. You can edit it in your info, like about page, So you can add some keywords and words that are not valuable, that are not to be seen by your audience, and then Facebook will automatically block the comments that contains that specific words. I think that's from me. Maybe the other can have additional insights.
Okay. I think I saw Nelson and Sarah shaking their heads there. Thank you for that, Amanda. I still have so many questions. Jen, where do I direct those questions? I know the audience also has questions, and folks on the panel are going to respond to these questions offline. So Jen is going to let us know what next steps are. But mine's just to say thank you to the panelists. You guys are wonderful, and thank you for the work that you do. And with that, Jen, please help us close.
Yeah, great. Thank you all. What a fantastic discussion. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for facilitating NOC. So also a huge thank you to the AHO, and in particular Merck and Facebook, as well as our direct partners in shaping all this work, the Bay Area Global Health Alliance and Backs Up Podcast. So you can check out insightsdialogue.org to explore more. And of course, all the research and work that was featured in today's conversation is on the site. Also have this event as well as future events that are recorded and placed on the site, as well as our Backs Up podcast, new episode of that coming up very soon, and another live session from us coming up next month. If you want to continue the conversation, speak with the panelists, talk with your peers, you can join the Insights Dialogue group in the Boost community. So Boost community, if you're not already a part of it, is free to join. boostcommunity.org. I think we're plugging some stuff into the chat right now. And then if you join the Insights Dialogue learning group in the Boost community, you continue the conversation. Again, ask direct questions to the panelists, and just stay informed about what's to come next with this platform and series. And we'd also love for you to take our post-webinar survey if you have just a minute. Would love to hear from you about what your thoughts were, but also what you'd like to hear about next. So thank you all. And again, thank you also especially to our panelists, Nelson, Sarah, Amanda. Really appreciate your time and energy and all the amazing work that you've done. And looking forward to our next conversation. Thanks, everyone.